Welcome everyone. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Anna and I'm a senior marketing specialist at the University of Tartu. I am very happy to welcome you to the Alumni Talk 2023. Alumni Talks is our new series of webinars where our fantastic alumni share their stories of studying at the University of Tartu and also give a short lecture on a topic they chose. Today with me, I have Joseph, and Joseph is originally from the United States. He moved to Estonia in 2020 to study Actuarial and Financial Engineering at the University of Tartu. During his time, he was also an international student ambassador for the whole 2 years. And he graduated in 2022 and started working at Pipedrive as the Information Security Risk Officer. The topic of his today's talk is quantitative modeling of cybersecurity risk. Before I give a floor to Joseph, I would like to mention a few things. So if you have any questions during the webinar, you're welcome to leave them at any point on their Q&A box. If you have any technical issues, please let us know about it and we will try to resolve your issues as soon as we can. So also this webinar is recording. So after the webinar is done, we are going to send you the recording of this webinar so you will be able to rewatch it, or in case you're missing this webinar, you will be able to watch it as well. So without further ado, I will give a floor to Joseph. Joseph, please, the floor is yours and you're welcome to start your talk.
All right, thanks, Anna. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Everybody should be able to see it now.
Yes, you can make a full screen as well.
And I'll enter the slideshow. So like Anna said, I'm the Information Security Risk Officer at Pipedrive in Tallinn. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about quantitative modeling of cybersecurity risk. So what actually qualifies me to talk about it is, I did the Actuarial and Financial Engineering program in Tartu. I started working at Pipedrive immediately after graduation in July of 2022. And this is the Tallinn building for Pipedrive. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about my time at the university because this is an admissions talk. Then I'll spend some time introducing cybersecurity risk and talking about how the program fits into cybersecurity risk management. Talk a little bit about quantifying cybersecurity risk and some possible directions that I see the topic taking in the future based on the research. And then we'll have some time for question and answer. So my journey at the university, I applied in January 2020. So if you have any admissions timeline related questions about my experience, keep in mind that it's going to be very different from what you experience. Because, for example, I didn't get my final acceptance decision until July, but that was because of the restrictions at the time. So I arrived in Tartu in August of 2020. And then during the first semester, I had 7 classes, which included the time series analysis class. And classes were 4 days a week for me. So time series analysis is a class where you'll have the option to take it the first semester. But as long as nothing's changed, the recommendation is that you wait. My thoughts are, if you have the technical background and you're willing to put in the time, you can take it. But if you're maybe unsure or you want to focus on the other classes, then maybe it's better to substitute something else in and take the time series analysis in the 3rd semester. So the actual core of the program and the thesis, the classes are in the Delta building, which are, you can see on the map kind of at the top here. And relative to that, the main international student dorms are around here. and over here. So if you're in this building, the Ratuse 22, this is a really nice walk along the river to get to your classes in the morning. Typically, the Actuarial and Financial Engineering courses are scheduled for 4 days a week. And that means that if you have classes outside of the program, you might have classes 5 days a week, but the program classes usually take up 4. And then if you do everything correctly and you get everything done, the thesis and the master's seminar are the only things you have to do in the last semester. But of course, you have the option to take extra courses anytime throughout the program. I took several extra courses. The courses on top are ones that I could count toward the degree. And then the ones on the bottom are just optional extra classes that I took. I've highlighted in bold the ones that are directly related to the job that I do now. So statistical machine learning, microeconomics, and game theory are all classes that I took in the university, and I feel like they were optional, but they're very relevant to cybersecurity risk. And I'll talk a little bit about why, specifically for microeconomics and game theory later. I do find that the Estonian class was of benefit to me, just being able to communicate in town. And not every website in Estonia is in English. Specifically, some of the mobile carriers only have Estonian and Russian websites. And then the last thing that I did as a student was I was an international student ambassador. And so that, for my time, took up about 1 meeting a month, and then several internal events. And this is a picture from my first year. We went to the town square and they had an ice rink set up in Tartu. So we did that for our Christmas event that year. And then we also held events for other international students. And one interesting thing was that you get the opportunity to participate in other events before they get announced to the rest of the students. So for example, we had this International Students versus Estonian Culture series. You can find that on the website. I thought it was pretty interesting to participate in, and you would see some of the faces from this picture as well, because that was the year that we did it. So now that I've talked about my experience at the university, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the topic on the quantification of cybersecurity risk. So I want to start out by what I'm going to use as the definition of risk, and that's the chance that something could go wrong. So today I am taking a risk of doing this presentation, taking the risk of making a fool of myself, saying something incorrect, or just some other way of making a fool of myself. But mathematically, risk is impact times probability, or some variation on that. And so what I've presented here in this graph is the very basic qualitative risk management framework. So you qualify probability as very low through very high, and impact as very low through very high. And you get some risk score out of it. And here I have low, medium, and high. And there are all kinds of variations on this that you can find, but this is the most basic. And so what's the purpose of a cybersecurity risk program? Its purpose is to highlight the top cybersecurity risks within the organization. It ensures that decision makers are aware of cybersecurity risks associated with their projects and the decisions that they make. And it determines the effectiveness of cybersecurity controls on risk. And I think that these are the 3 things that really classify what it needs to be. And then I've given some nice to haves as a second 2. And these are some of the areas for potential research. providing an assessment on how best to spend an information security budget, and determining how big the information security budget should be. So how does actuarial and financial engineering actually fit into this cybersecurity risk management? It provides the basis for a theoretical background. So that's the probability theory, the math stats, and if you decide to take it, microeconomics and game theory, the basis for applying expected value. So that's risk can be defined also as an expected value of loss, finding the time value of money, figuring out what something should cost. So in the program, this would be your insurance premium or an option price. And so that's sort of this similar topic with risk. And then the program also covers some numerical methods, but specifically for information security risk management, the Monte Carlo method. And then, of course, the thesis gives you that basis for working on a research project over several months, which is effectively what a cybersecurity risk management program is. And then, of course, there's the option to take microeconomics as part of the degree and game theory as an optional credit. So what are the actual problems with cybersecurity risk management that really kind of require that technical knowledge that the actuarial and financial engineering degree gives? Well, first, risk assessment isn't necessarily an intuitive process. And what I mean by this is that people commonly make mistakes. For instance, they will take an impact and they'll take the most severe impact, but they'll be thinking about the likelihood of a much less severe impact, and they'll pair those up and they'll overestimate the risk. And leading to this, some of the qualitative measurements are often poorly defined. And what I mean by that is they might use words such as high, medium, low, which people define differently in their heads. Your definition of a low probability event is probably different than mine. But if I say that this will happen with a 25% probability within the next year, we can agree on what that means. And part of the one thing that I really think drives this is that people in information security generally don't come from math or stats backgrounds, so they don't have necessarily the theoretical background to see what a well-defined scale would look like, and they are used to these qualitative measurements. Another thing contributing to this is that the standards and audit teams generally accept these qualitative methods, and they aren't always very strict. So for example, most requirements state that a cybersecurity risk assessment only needs to be done once a year, even though it's really best done as a continuous process. Another thing is that businesses have right now problems and they have limited resources. So if a business has a right now problem and they need an assessment of risk, then they don't have the time to wait for you to do an analysis for 3 months and just wait on this decision. They need a way to find out kind of what the risk is and then make a decision based on that. Another problem that's sort of separate is that companies generally don't discuss the status of their cybersecurity programs outside the company, and that includes the risk component. And that's because that would present more risk to the company. And so it's hard to get good information for academic researchers unless they're working directly with a company, and companies only have their inside data to work with. One of the problems that actually comes out of the literature is the quantitative method authors themselves. Some of them take a qualitative versus quantitative stance with no room for middle ground. And I think that really holds cybersecurity risk management back because of this businesses having right problems with limited resources. And one of the other literature problems is that a lot of the available frameworks have major drawbacks. And one example is the NIST documentation, which is meant for US government use. And so as a result, it takes a lot of resources to implement. It's not really that clear how to implement it from the documentation itself. And so a business, even the size of Pipedrive with around 1,000 people, doesn't have the resources to fully implement a program like that. And without the expertise, it's maybe not even clear how to implement it. So what do we actually need to get started with risk quantification? And this is my opinion. I really think that the minimum team has to be one person with a math or statistics background and one person with a cybersecurity background. And this is because the risk management program, when you do it continuously, takes a lot of resources, and you need that math person, or in this case, it could be somebody from this actuarial and financial engineering background, to look at the academic literature and read up on different news related to risk management, and then the cybersecurity person to stay up to date with all of the current cybersecurity threats. And then at least the measuring and managing information risk. It presents the FAIR model, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And I think that it is the best one-stop shop for cybersecurity risk management. And then the back two books, I actually haven't finished the How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk, but it provides sort of a more theoretical background, and it presents the information about how to break down a risk, how to think about the component pieces to make it quantifiable. So then we get into actually quantifying cybersecurity risk. And the main models actually come from the books that I showed in the last slide. And one is Applied Information Economics, which is the blue and green books in the back, How to Measure Anything. And then the front book presents the FAIR methodology. And really, the FAIR methodology only builds on it by telling you how to break down the risk. But both rely on expert estimates. So you can calibrate the experts, basically make them better at estimating. And I personally did a calibration course, and I was a bit skeptical in the beginning, but they do make you better at estimating your uncertainty. So you calibrate your experts and you get estimates from them. And those estimates feed into the PERT distribution, which I will explain on the next slide. And then you use the PERT distribution to do a Monte Carlo simulation, which I'll discuss in a couple slides. And then I'll wrap that whole discussion up with an example. So both are also an attempt to model singular risks. They don't really look at the whole risk picture across an organization. They focus on individual risks. If I recall correctly, both mention updating the models based on real data, but neither really offer a concrete solution to do this. They pretty much stick to the expert estimates, distribution, Monte Carlo simulation. And then if you want to look into the academic literature, most of the research is on specific risks and takes a game theory approach. So when we talk about the PERT distribution, as promised, you take the experts and you get the minimum value of something, the most likely value, and the maximum value. And you use these, and it gives you a density function like one of these. So these both have minimums at 0, or all three, maximums at 100, and then the most likely values are 10, 50, and 70. And if you want to read any more on this distribution, the information's on Wikipedia. You can also look at the beta distribution because this is a special case of the beta distribution. And so after you get your expert estimates for the PERT distribution, you have to use the Monte Carlo method. And this uses random sampling to obtain a result. This is one of the things that gets studied in the Actuarial and Financial Engineering course. There's a whole class on the Monte Carlo method. It's capable of really accurate results, but the cost is the computation time. To get convergence to the actual value can take a significant amount of time. And so in general, you generate inputs from the appropriate probability distribution. In the generic case for both of these models, it's the PERT distribution. Then you use these inputs to perform calculations. You can either repeat it a certain number of times, or because the error is well defined of the method, you can continue until the error is within an acceptable bound. And then you return your result. So how do we actually use this process going from an expert estimate to getting some sort of result? So in this example, we'll take the FAIR model and we'll look at this vulnerability section. So vulnerability in the FAIR model way of looking at things is a value between 0 and 100. And that represents the difficulty that it would take to for a threat event, so somebody trying to access the system, to become a loss event, them actually accessing the system. And so here, let's say we need the estimates for threat capability and resistance strength to determine vulnerability. So we obtain the expert estimates, and then we generate pairs of threat capability and resistance strength. We check if the threat capability is greater than the resistance strength. And we repeat this process of generating pairs and performing this check some number of times, whether it's determined in advance and we say it, or we pick it off of error. But then the number of times that the threat capability is greater than the resistance strength divided by the number of runs gives this value of P, which could be representative of the vulnerability. So I talked about a lot of problems, and I talked about what there are now for solutions. But now I want to talk about where there's room for improvement. And the first place that there's room for improvement is actually in the choice of distribution. So the PERT distribution is maybe better than the triangle distribution, which is basically the PERT distribution, but a triangle instead of this nice curve shape. But this can be replaced by a more appropriate distribution that's empirically obtained. And so one example is the exponential distribution, which I have represented over here. And then other than replacing the distribution, we can actually take into account the correlation between events or between loss sizes. And this is something that's not accounted for in the generic model. The other option I see for really making improvements is improving the simulation itself. So if you have a lot of simulations to run, one of the things that you might want to consider is speeding up the convergence rate of the Monte Carlo method using some variance reduction techniques. And you get a chance to talk about some of those in the program, in the Actuarial and Financial Engineering program. Another thing is that simulations could be written to optionally incorporate more parts of the risk portfolio so that you could examine more than one risk at once and sort of determine a more comprehensive view of the organization's cybersecurity risk exposure. And then one way to do this is the FAIR model can actually be implemented using a Bayesian network, which allows the model to be more flexible and extensible. So as you saw, there's this tree-based FAIR model, but if you look at it through a Bayesian network approach, you can make this more flexible. You can attach the nodes differently, and you can add more. And the paper that I got this idea from is this one here. And so those are some ways that I think that we could improve the current methods. And then there are some ideas also from Actuarial and Financial Engineering that could affect cybersecurity risk. And the first one actually comes directly out of one of the classes, and that's the risk theory class, also called ruin theory. If you want to look it up on Wikipedia, it's called ruin theory, but there's a whole 3-credit class on this topic in the program. And here we see that the probability of ruin is actually well defined, and you don't need a simulation to get bounds on the probability of ruin. There's no equivalent for this in cybersecurity. If I wanted to get a probability of ruin, I would have to simulate all of the cybersecurity events and find some way to figure out if we've gone over some cybersecurity risk budget. But the basic process for this is here. You have some initial capital X, you have some amount of income, which is per unit of time, which is C, and then you have the loss events. And whether this model is appropriate for cybersecurity would have to be explored. Another thing is to take an options approach. So I wrote my master's thesis on stochastic volatility models for option pricing. And options are typically, people know them from stocks, and they give you the right to buy some stock at some price at some time. Well, an embedded option is what's used in this options approach for cybersecurity investment. And it gives the issuer or the holder the right to take some specified action at the present or in the future. And you can read some more about this on Investopedia. That's actually where I got this definition from. But the paper that I read lays out the cost of cybersecurity attacks and the arrival of cybersecurity controls and how that affects the firm's optimal investment strategy. And the paper uses a formula compatible with the current real options literature. And so real options are things like stock options. And so by the end of the Actuarial and Financial Engineering program, you'll be very familiar with this style of differential equation. But I'm not going to go too deep into it now, so that you'll have room to explore that actually during your program. And so that ends the presentation portion, and we can go ahead and move on to the question and answer time.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Joseph, for your presentation, for an interesting talk. And yeah, it's time to move to our question and answer session. We received quite some questions. So let's start from the first one. Did you do the entire thesis in the last semester, or is it recommended to start earlier?
So the thesis course is 30 credits and it's the last semester. But I think it was in October, we actually picked thesis topics. Now, if you go into the program knowing your thesis topic, there's probably the option to start earlier, but I didn't have my thesis topic going in. The faculty actually provided us with some proposed topics. So each faculty member has the opportunity to propose some topics, and then they propose those in a seminar. So if you don't have a topic, you don't have to worry too much. You can select one of those. But yeah, you start really in the October, November timeframe before the last semester.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. We can move to the next question, and I guess we can combine this. There are these similar questions. What are your thoughts on the possibility of completing this program while working full-time from 9 to 5? And did you work yourself during the studies?
So myself, I did the internship part-time during one semester. And so that semester, I would say I had to be very vigilant about time management. Doing 9 to 5, you're going to be running over your classes if you're working that 9 to 5, which for me personally, like I have to be in the classroom, so I couldn't do it. And I don't know right now if they're still recording all of the classes. My last semester, the Actuarial and Financial Engineering program was still doing that, but that would be a good question for the program director during that talk.
Mm-hmm. So we are going to host the virtual meetings with program directors, so maybe this would be a good talk, good question to ask from the program director as well about the recordings. All right, let's move to the next one. Do you need to speak Estonian to work at Pipedrive?
No, so you don't need to really anywhere in Estonia necessarily. There are jobs that you do need Estonian to get. A lot of the smaller companies, they're mostly staffed by Estonians, so you're going to need Estonian. At Pipedrive specifically, no, you don't. But you know, if you're going to work in Estonia, it's helpful because for me, like there are Estonians in the office, they speak in Estonian, and sometimes it's about a topic that I need to, or I have like an opinion on. And so while I don't necessarily speak Estonian, if I can capture enough of the conversation, I can get them to switch to English. But if I didn't speak Estonian at all, then that opportunity would be lost. So not required, definitely a good thing to have if you're going to work in Tallinn or Tartu.
We have also related questions. Do you think it is difficult to get a job in Estonia without speaking Estonian?
It depends on what kind of job you're looking for. Developers, I would say it's not as required, but it is more difficult for some of the other fields. Like some of the analysis jobs that I looked at, they required Estonian. Some of the banking jobs required Estonian. So it will make it more difficult to get a job if you don't speak Estonian, but it's not impossible to get a job if you don't.
Thank you. Let's move to this question. Hey, Joseph, I'm a first-year student in the Actuarial and Financial Engineering program here in Tartu. I'm wondering what sort of problems machine learning solves in cybersecurity risk management.
Yeah, so I'm not working on anything machine learning related yet. But what the statistical machine learning class is it gives me more of like a theoretical foundation of what's possible from the statistical machine learning standpoint. And also the Bayesian network approach that I talked about in the last couple slides there, that could be fed into a machine learning model. And so that's kind of where it could be used. But right now, I don't think I've seen a lot of literature on using machine learning to look at problems.
Thank you. Let's take a question from Jan. One of the most challenging steps of the FAIR FAIR methodology is determining the assessing threat agent populations. Can you share some of your experiences and ideas in this regards?
So I haven't had a whole lot of experience with the methodology itself, but I've started working with it recently, and I think the place to start is with the basics, which are actually outlined in the book. Not that I'm trying to sell you the book. I think that like the insider and outsider threats are good places to start with. Like keeping it general rather than getting specific is one of the most important things, because these assessments have a tendency to really get out of control quickly. And so I think when you define your scope, that will help you determine what threat agent populations you're gonna end up with. For example, right now I'm working with a risk, and really the way that I've scoped it is such that there's really only privileged insiders. And so you can use the scoping to help you determine what the threat agent should be.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Let's take our next question. Would the cybersecurity be a good field for industrial master's program, combining industry needs and research wants?
I think it depends on the maturity of the cybersecurity risk program of a particular company. If they're at the level where they're self-sustaining and they're starting to work towards this this quantitative approach, and then they also have a lot of good data, I think that it would be a good field for an industrial master's program. But if they're like still sort of getting defined, then maybe they don't have the capability to support that sort of that broad of a topic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next question. Instead of Pipedrive, did you ever consider working at a money transfer company like Wise? And if so, how would one best apply the learnings in the master's program to a money transfer company?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I actually did look at Wise. I don't know if there were any opportunities for me to apply, like jobs open and like that was related directly to my interest, but really the analysis part of the program does align with a lot of jobs at Wise pretty directly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next question. How is Estonia as a country to pursue mathematical oriented courses as opposed to IT courses?
Like from a university perspective, the university is well equipped to handle that. From a job market perspective, it depends on how interested you are in I've lost the word. But it depends on how interested you are in data analysis, because that's, I think, where most of the math related jobs are. There is also the statistics office, but I don't know what the requirements are to work there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Were you equipped enough to become an actuary in Europe, Switzerland, or UK?
I didn't personally apply for any actuary jobs, and I'm not that familiar with the requirements in those countries, or like Europe as well.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back about the courses question. How did you manage to take so many optional courses, including language classes that require quite a lot of time?
So yeah, I don't recommend taking two in the same semester. You can do one a semester. That's not so bad, but 2 is too much time. I found that out the hard way. And my second semester, I did take too many classes, so it's possible. I think I took 36 credits, and I just found that it was too much, even not working. So
yeah, that's quite a lot. Did you take 2 language courses at the same time?
yeah, I took Estonian and Russian on the basis of Estonian with the purpose of improving my Estonian. And it was too much. It took a significant amount of my time.
Yeah.
But also contributing to it, I took 3 courses during the last semester when all I had to do was my thesis. So that's why I had so many extra classes.
Thank you. Next question. In your opinion, what are some cybersecurity risks that are not getting enough attention?
I think that this is very company dependent and like sector dependent. So depending on the sector, I think like the SaaS applications are pretty much covered by the OWASP top 10, which is basically a top 10 cybersecurity threat list. But when you look at some other organizations that aren't as heavily reliant on technology, then maybe that's not a good representation. And so maybe the risks for them would not be as well represented.
Thank you. Next question. Did you knew before going to Tartu that you were going to stay there? Why did you decide to stay?
So no, I didn't know. When I went there, I just went there with an open mind and was like, you know, if I like it enough, maybe I'll stay. If I don't like it, then obviously I won't stay. I ended up staying because it's where I found a job. So I got the job in Tallinn and I decided to stay.
Next question is very related to the previous one.
Yeah.
How would you compare Tallinn and Tartu? Why is Tartu more suitable for students?
I don't know that Tartu is more suitable for students. There is like a very big size difference. So Tartu, everything is walkable except for chemicum and physicum. If you don't live out there, then you do probably want to take the bus because it's like half-hour to 40-minute walk. But everything else is really close. The main building, the Delta building, the building where the languages are, the biology building, all of that is within like 15 minutes of each other. Whereas in Tallinn, and like the city center and the other city related things, but in Tallinn, you have to take the bus a lot of times. Like for me, from my apartment to work, it's about a 40-minute walk. It's like 12 minutes on the bus. To get to the city center would take me like an hour and 20 minutes to walk, which is halfway across Tallinn, but it would be all the way across Tartu. So that's the size difference. People generally really like one and are not so keen on the other. That's what I found. There are some people that like both, but I would say that they're probably in the minority. Personally, I prefer Tallinn for living. But as a student, Tartu is very nice to live in.
Thank you. The question about the academic staff, academic lecturers, how was the school staff? Were the lecturers good?
I would say on the whole, the lecturers were quite good. The only issues I had, I think, were related to English fluency. Like some of them, it's not like it's not bad, but it's not like it's not at a fluent level because especially in the actuarial and financial engineering field, a lot of them, though they speak English once a week and it's that class. So then, you know, the practice isn't there. but I would say that overall the lectures were still understandable and the quality was there.
Thank you. Did you have other course mates who stayed in Estonia and are working in the same field?
I would say yes, but a lot of the course mates that I know are also Estonian. So most of the people, because there was so much online interaction, most of the people that I met in my courses were Estonian. A lot of the international students only attended online.
Thank you very much. We have a few questions. I think this one is not finished. Were you equipped enough to, so you can finish the question and then we can answer that. And when did you complete your master's?
So I completed my master's this last May. And then I defended so I guess technically June, because I defended in June. And I had the job offer for Pipedrive, I think in April or May. And then I chose to wait to start until July. So I had the offer before graduation.
Wow, nice. That's really great. Okay. Did many of your course mates take an actuary route as a career? What was the most common career path after the graduation?
I would say, I don't know if any are in the actuary route. I think the most common career path is something analyst related. So like I do cybersecurity risk analysis and management. And then a lot of them work, I think, at banks as some sort of analyst.
Okay, we have 2 questions left. So if you have any questions, please write so we still have time to answer them. Next question, what did you like the most about the student life in Tartu? Any events that you would recommend?
I think the thing that I like the most about student life is that, you know, if you want to find something, you can. There's constantly events from, obviously the ambassador events are the best events, but there's also like ESN, and they host a lot more, or I should say their events aren't focused on academics. They're focused on getting to know other international students. One of their big events is karaoke. And I know that I've been to, I think, a couple of those, and they were always a good time. So I think, yeah, that's probably for events. As far as the rest of student life, I really liked the Delta Center. That's it's a really nice building, and like people from other programs go there to study, like in between classes. So that building is a really nice part of the academic student life.
Thank you. What was your favorite course? My
favorite course. Now I have to remember all of the courses.
Maybe Ukrainian?
Yeah. I already got my grades, so I don't have to say that, right? Yeah, for reference, I took Ukrainian with Anna. I don't know. I think maybe it was this models in financial engineering, I think is what it's called. But basically it's a second spring course. And that was basically what I went on to do my thesis topic as.
All right. Last question. Did many of your course mates get a job before graduation? And what material is the most important beneficial skill you have learned during your courses?
I'm not sure how many of them got a job before graduation. but I know that of the people that I talked to, they got a job either before graduation or shortly thereafter. I think some of them did have a job at least partway through that last semester. I don't know anybody that's not currently employed 6 months later. And what material? So for me, it was actually, I didn't have a strong probability theory and statistics background. And so that material has immensely benefited me with the current research that I'm doing at my job. And from the optional courses, I would say it's game theory because there's so much in the risk management literature.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We received one more question, so we still have a few minutes, so we will take it as well. Is it expensive to live in Estonia as a student?
Compared to the US, no. Compared to some other countries, yes. So it really depends on where you're from, but I've heard of people living on as few as like 500, on less than 500 euros a month. But if you want, and that's living in the dorms. But if you want to live out in town, I think my budget was around 600 or 700 a month. And then there are people that obviously spend more than that every month. But part of it depends on.
Sorry, did you rent apartment or did you live in dorm?
I rented an apartment. Rent out in town has gone up a little bit, but usually you can find something between like 350 euros and 500 euros, depending on what kind of size and location. If you get further out where it would take you longer to get to class, you can obviously get it less expensively.
Thank you. Okay, the last question that just arrived. What was your academic professional background prior to doing the master's program?
So I have a bachelor's in management computer systems, which is basically a mix of business and computer science. And then I minored in math there. And then I was in the Navy as an electrician for 6 years. Substitute taught for a year and then came to do my master's. So that was one of the other challenges, was trying to remember things after 7 to 8 years away from doing anything mathematically related.
But I guess you did well, so with remembering this stuff and doing your master's program. So I guess we don't have questions anymore. Thank you so much, Joseph, for your wonderful talk. Thank you everyone for joining us today. If you're interested to apply to master's program in Actuarial and Financial Engineering, the application period is already open and you can apply before March 15, so don't forget to submit your application. We are also going to host virtual meetings with program directors, so if you have any questions about the program, that would be the best place to ask your questions, and we are going to send you information about these meetings over an email where we also include the recording of this webinar as well. So thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, Joseph, again, and I hope to see you in Tartu one day.